Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to this week's episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. My latest book, Yamakoa, The Haunting of Mount Yami, is now out. If you like terrifying mountain stories full of ghosts, monsters, and other creepies, then do check it out. It's available on Amazon right now. This week, we're looking at various monsters you most definitely wouldn't want to run into at night. Or during the day. Or at any time at all, really. Our first story is about a Japanese student who is studying overseas and lives in an attic apartment. There's a subway down below with an escalator that sometimes starts moving unexpectedly late at night. Nobody ever appears to be on it, at least that he can see. But when his friends come to visit one night, well, find out what happens in Mother and Child on the Escalator. This story happened when I was an exchange student in Europe. So, back when I couldn't really speak the language, I often invited my Japanese friends over to my place to hang out and drink. I lived in an attic, and I could see the subway exit through the large round window I had. There was an escalator that worked only for the exit, but the scary thing was that sometimes it moved late at night for no reason. Being so late at night, there were no cars out, so when the escalator suddenly started with a loud boom, it scared the crap out of me. Sometimes I'd check out the round window to see what was going on, but there was never anybody there. Well, this sort of thing happened every once in a while. One weekend, I decided to invite a few friends over like usual, and I contacted the friend I was closest to at university. Apparently, he was drinking with another friend at that very moment, and they said they'd come over. He arrived about an hour later, and what do you know? His friend was a cute girl. She was the only other Japanese person at the same school, so I remember feeling really jealous. So, the three of us started drinking and we were talking about art, the city recently, that sort of stuff. I was an art history student. The last train left just after midnight, and it wasn't exactly a very safe place to be at night. So I told them they should just spend the night at my place like always. And we started drinking again. My friend, who stood by the round window to have a cigarette, then said, "Hey, the escalator is moving." I looked at the clock and it was past 2 a.m. Again? I thought. "Yeah, that happens sometimes," I explained. The girl with us seemed interested and went over to the window to look outside. Where? She asked. "Ah, it really is," she said excitedly. "It's scary when you're here alone," I said as I had another drink. I talked about this and that, but honestly, I had a crush on that girl. She continued looking out the window for a bit before she suddenly said, "Hey, someone's there," and called me over. No way. I figured it had to be a drunk, but when I went over to the window, nobody was there. "There's no one there," I said, and looked at the girl. "Yeah, there's no one there," she said. "Why would anyone be there?" my friend said as he puffed on his cigarette. I went to the toilet. My friend finished up his cigarette and then we went back to the room to continue drinking. However, the girl, who was still staring out the window, suddenly gasped in surprise. My friend and I jumped. "What's wrong?" we asked. "Two people just came out. A mother and a child, I think." There's no way, I thought, and when I got up to check, of course, nobody was there. There's no one out there. You like these kinds of jokes, huh? Quit it, you're scaring me. After we grumbled our complaints, I was tired and soon fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, or rather, the next lunchtime, my friend was also there asleep, but the girl was nowhere to be seen. Well, maybe she went home on the first train, I thought, so I didn't worry too much about it. but she was on my mind for other reasons, so I called her again that night. I asked her about what happened the night before. "I couldn't sleep, so I went home early," she said. It was just as I thought. We chatted about this and that and ended by agreeing to go out again some other time. Just the two of us. Just as I was about to hang up, she said something. "So, about that escalator. Why was she so hung up on that escalator? The whole thing was so strange." "It might move again today, you know," I joked, but she answered me in a low voice. "If it does, then you shouldn't look at it. They'll see you." Her voice was so low that it genuinely scared me. "Seriously, you're freaking me out. Don't say stuff like that," I said. We agreed to meet 3 days later, so when the day arrived, I went over to her house. Since I could cook and she couldn't, I made dinner for the two of us and we had a toast together. From that day, we started going out. My art friends didn't really care and were just like, "Oh yeah, congrats." And that was it. They still often came over to my house after that to drink. But our relationship didn't last very long. We started going out around January or February, but it only lasted for about 6 months. The reason for that was she suddenly went back to Japan. I remember that she had lost a lot of weight by the time she left. I wondered if she was still lonely, even though I was there with her, and wondered why she left me behind and returned home. She barely even saw me for the 2 weeks before she left. And thanks to that, I wasn't even able to say goodbye to her, and that still bugs me even now. I was pretty wrecked that she just up and left me like that. "She's just a girl, who cares?" my art student friends said. "Don't waste time worrying about someone as selfish as that," they said about her. Mostly they just nodded and didn't really say much about the situation though. 6 months later, right around this time the year before last, I got an email from a friend who went to study art in another country. "She's in the hospital." Apparently it wasn't an injury or anything like that, but something mental. She was definitely a bit of a strange girl when we were dating, and I remembered that she used to suffer from sleep paralysis and nightmares. She muttered to herself throughout the day, and when things got really bad, she would scream as well. I didn't think it was that bad though, so the news came as quite a shock. At the time, I thought that maybe I should go back to Japan and check in on her or something, but sadly, I didn't have the credits nor the money to leave school, so I wasn't able to go back. Another 6 months passed and I was able to briefly go back to Japan during the summer holidays. I decided to take that time to visit her family home in Hiroshima as well. I was from Tokyo, so the transportation costs of getting there were pretty steep. Relying just on the address I had, I went to visit her parents' house. Yet, as I stood in front of the house, I couldn't help but think that something was wrong with it. I don't know how to explain it, but it was like the colours were dull or something. I pressed the doorbell and her mother came out. The moment she saw me, she screamed, "Ah, it's you!" Her sudden loud voice scared me, and I just knew that something was wrong at that moment as well. She let me inside and then showed me into the living room. When I asked how my ex was doing, I was flabbergasted. There was a large photo of her above the family altar, and there was incense burning. I was confused and unable to grasp the situation. "What's going on?" I screamed. As soon as the sentence left my lips, I had a thought. It must have been suicide. And, as I suspected, she had apparently escaped from the hospital, left the city, and then jumped from a building somewhere. Honestly, my memory from that time is a little hazy. I was beyond shocked, and to tell you the truth, I was ready to try and start things over with her again. I asked her mother why she did it, but she didn't know. She was in the hospital, after all, so all she heard was that it was something mental. In the end, I only had a few days free, so after visiting her grave, I returned to Tokyo the next day, and then a week later, I returned to my overseas studies. When I got back to my attic apartment, I found a letter. It was from her. Honestly, I think that was the most frightened I've ever been in my life. When I opened the envelope, it was horrible. I was a mess. I could barely understand the contents and the handwriting was rough. I'm going to die. They've been stalking me ever since that day. That sound and those two, they follow me not just in daily life, but in my dreams as well. They were the only words I could make out. There was a rough sketch in the envelope, and it was of the round window in my apartment. I'm not really the crying type, but that day, I cried. I cried when my grandfather passed away 15 years earlier, but this time, I cried even more than that. Taking that opportunity, I hurriedly returned to Japan, and I'm still here today. Before I did, however, I went to visit another overseas art student. He was rather aloof, as usual, but when I told him everything that had happened, he said something interesting. Actually, I've kept quiet about it all this time, but according to him, ever since my ex visited my apartment for the first time, a strange mother and child had been following her around. I could somehow envision it, but at the time all I could think was such a thing even really possible? Like, in the 6 months we were dating, she only ever stayed at my house that one single night. It seemed she kept quiet about it in consideration of me, and she made our friend promise not to mention it either. When I heard that, I decided I'd quit my studies and return to Japan once and for all. Actually, there's one more thing I've kept quiet about, my friend said. I saw them too. The same mother and child that she saw. It was so sudden that I didn't believe him, but he continued with a frightened expression on his face. They've been following me around ever since then as well. Ever since I heard that strange sound from the elevator. Until you get back to Japan, you should stay far away from that escalator, he said. I quickly packed up all my stuff to go home, arranged a plane ticket and then got the hell out of there. But before I did, I made one more trip to visit all the places I'd spent time with her in. On my final night before returning home, right around 2 a.m, the escalator started, just like that time when she was standing by the round window. I ignored my friend's warning and went over to look. I watched until the escalator stopped. There was nobody there. Nobody there at all. That's the end of my story. Luckily, the mother and child didn't follow me back to Japan, and now I'm living a normal life. But there's still one thing that's been bothering me. That is, when I got back home, I found a letter addressed to me from my art student friend. In it, he said he was going to kill himself and I shouldn't go looking for him. Plus, while I was dating my girlfriend, he apparently assaulted her. After that was when she started to lose her mind, the letter said. After that, I pulled out the letter that she had addressed to me. Until that point, I hadn't been able to read the final sentence, but finally, I did. I'm sorry, it said. I'm truly sorry. Our next story is another story I've been wanting to feature on the show for quite a while now. It's an all-time classic that you can find in Kowabana Origins, and so I'm very happy to finally be able to bring it to the show this week. A young boy goes to stay at his uncle's holiday house during the winter holidays and happens to spot something strange in the distance. Something he shouldn't have seen. Something that's now coming for him. Find out what in Jashi. This happened when I was 14. During the winter holidays, I went to stay in my uncle's, he was in his 30s at the time, holiday house in N Prefecture. In reality, he wanted to go there with his girlfriend, but they broke up, and so he asked me to go instead. I'd liked him ever since I was young, so I was happy to go. We lived in the same town, so I was driven to his house in the morning and we left by car. My uncle was a pretty trendy guy, and ever since I was a kid he taught me about various games, outdoor activities, music, and so on. I respected him a lot. It was a long trip, 8 hours one way by car. We chatted and listened to music and, on the way, took a bunch of detours. It was really fun. Finally, we approached our destination and stopped by the grocery store to pick up some dinner. Then we drove up a rather steep mountain road and reached his holiday house. It wasn't that big, but I remember it being a fashionable wooden lodge, like a hideout. I could see 2 or 3 more villas down from it, but it didn't look like anyone was there. I ate offal, seafood, and fried vegetables to my heart's content. We cooked a mountain of rice as well. It was an amazing dinner. After dinner, we went to watch TV and play video games by the fireplace. As the night went on, we told scary stories to each other. Scary stories were my uncle's specialty, and they really did terrify me. If I get the chance, I'd like to write a few of those down too. Suddenly he muttered, like he'd just remembered something. "Don't enter that mountain down the back." Apparently, not even the locals would go there. They might go there to pick some matsutake mushrooms, but that was it. It might not be related, he said, but in the past, a company president who owned a nearby villa hung himself in the mountains. Hearing all of that didn't exactly make me want to go there anyway, I thought at the time. Finally, around 5 in the morning, we went off to bed. Sunlight shining into my room woke me up. It was already past midday. Feeling thirsty, I went downstairs to get a drink. I peeked into my uncle's bedroom and he was still asleep, snoring. It was a bit cold, but it was a really nice morning. The air really is different out in the countryside. I went back to my own room and sat on the veranda. It directly faced the back mountain. It looked just like any old mountain. Nothing strange about it. I suddenly remembered there was a telescope in my room. I grabbed it so I could take a look at the beauty of nature across from me. I could see a town in the distance, but the fact I could even see the birds in the trees on the mountain was amazing. I must have sat there looking at them for about half an hour when I saw something move on the back mountain. It looked like a person. I could see their back and their head was smooth. Their whole body was constantly shaking. Was it some kind of local dance? They were holding a sickle, but what was strange was that the person was completely naked in the middle of winter. Was it that type of festival? Although it was only a single person. I was confused and several scenarios popped up in my mind. Their back was facing me, so I couldn't see their face. The movement reminded me of Sankai Juku, a dance troupe. I don't think I should keep looking, I thought instinctively. It was a person, but probably someone not quite right in the head. It was creepy. But I was still curious. I zoomed in closer on the telescope. The back of their head was smooth. Their skin was white. But then my heart stopped. While dancing, the person slowly turned around and looked right at me. It looked like a person. There was a nose and a mouth, but there were no eyebrows, and in the space between where they should have been was a single, vertical eye. I trembled. One eye. He was deformed. Our eyes met through the telescope. His mouth twitched. He started laughing. Hooah! I screamed the moment our eyes met. I couldn't stop crying. I wanted to die. I was overcome with this strange feeling of melancholy. I want to die. I want to die. I ran around the room in a daze, and then my uncle burst in. What's wrong? A monster! Huh? In the telescope, on the mountain. My uncle looked through the telescope. Tch. He let out a silent groan and grabbed his head. He cried, mucus running out of his nose. What the hell is that? I asked, feeling a little calmer than before. Nani nani ko? Nani nani ko? My uncle was crying, screaming out his ex-girlfriend's name. Freaked out, I slapped him. It was the first time I'd ever slapped a person before. His body trembled. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. Then he looked up at me. Jashi. Jashi? Listen, go to my room and bring the sunglasses on my desk. There are some there for you too. Why? Just do it! I went and grabbed the sunglasses like he said and gave them to him. He put them on with a shaky hand and looked through the telescope again. After a moment, he moved it around. Ugh, he moaned and motioned for me to come over. Look at it now, with your glasses on. Nervously, I put the glasses on and looked. It was dim, but I locked eyes with that thing through the trees. I was overcome with anxiety again, but it wasn't as bad as before. But still, my heart started beating faster. And the thing wasn't in the same place as before. It was still dancing strangely through the trees. It was looking directly at us, though. It was descending the mountain? No way. It was coming this way. Hey, you need to pee? Huh? What are you saying? If you need to pee, go grab an empty bottle from the kitchen and do it in that. Then bring it here. Having said that, he went down to the first floor. There was no way I could pee now, not after that. So after standing in my room dumbfounded for a few minutes, my uncle returned with a bottle full of urine. If you need to go, do it in this. He put down another empty bottle. No, I'm okay. But what is that thing? A thing from the mountain. A mountain child. I don't know. I often went camping in the mountains with my father as a child, but... not that back mountain there, but lots of strange things happen in the mountains, you know? At night, we could hear voices outside the tent, even though no one was there. But if you sprinkled around piss, it would, strangely, suddenly, stop. He looked into the telescope one more time. Gugh, he muttered again with a disgusted look on his face. He continued to watch the thing. So this thing, I don't know how fast it's going exactly, but it's moving really slow. I lost it along the way, but there's no doubt. It's coming right for this lodge. Then let's hurry up and get back to the car. I don't think that'll help. Not as long as it's interested in us. I think it'll chase us no matter where we go. This is just one type of curse. It's written with the characters for evil glance. That's why it's called Jashi. Evil eye. Ah, that's what you said before. But why do you know so much about it? I once lived in a village in Northern Europe for work. You know what? Let's talk about this after we get help. If we can get help. If we can. Are we just gonna wait here for it? Nope. We're gonna go out and meet it, head on. I thought staying inside would be the better option, but my uncle thought it would be better to do something before the creature reached the lodge. But if we were gonna go out and meet the terrifying creature head on, I thought running would have been a far better choice. But my uncle had always been reliable. I respected him, so I decided to go along with his plan. We each prepared sunglasses, an empty bottle, and some light food in a bag with binoculars, a wooden bat, torch, and so on. My uncle wanted to get this done before nightfall. Would we be able to withstand its gaze? It wouldn't be through the telescope this time, and although we had sunglasses, could we bear it up close? Worries and concerns ran through my mind. Although it was a mountain, there was a large open space between the lodge and it. We used the binoculars to search for the thing. According to my uncle, it was heading right for us, so it made sense that at some point we'd run into it. But we didn't want to go too far away, so we proceeded to about 500 meters from the lodge and waited there. If we can just redirect its interest somewhere else. How? I'm thinking that, first of all, we have to get close to it. But whatever you do, don't look straight into its eye. Look at it sideways. Do you understand what I'm saying? Avert your gaze and try to see it on the outside of your vision. Then we need to sprinkle the piss. And if that's no good, well... Are you listening? I'm being serious right now. You need to flash it. Huh? The Jashi hates unclean things. Excrement, genitals, so it won't kill it, but it'll allow us time to escape. I think it'll help us. And if that's no good, then all we can do is run. Quickly, back to the car. We sat on a rock and waited, overcome with an indescribable fear and worry. We took turns looking through the binoculars. It was now past 4 p.m. Big brother, wake up! It was the voice of my brother, who was 1 year younger than me. He died when I was 10. Big brother, wake up! We're going to be late for school! Shut up! Just let me sleep for 3 more minutes. Big brother, if you don't get up, you'll die. Wait, what? I was asleep? There was no way. Not with how scared I was. I was put to sleep? I looked over at my uncle. He was asleep too. I hurried to wake him. He jumped into the air. I looked at my watch. It was 5:30. It was growing dark around us. I broke out into a cold sweat. Hey, are you listening to me? Huh? A voice. A song? I calmed my nerves and forced myself to focus. There was a voice coming from the thicket a few hundred meters to our right. It was getting closer. It was like a folk song, and while I couldn't understand what it was saying, it was singing in a strange, high-pitched voice. I was so scared I didn't know what to do. Its voice alone made anything and everything around me feel off. "Are you ready? Just shine the light on its feet," my uncle screamed. I shone the light at the bottom of the thicket it was coming from. I saw its feet. The thing didn't have a single hair on it and was abnormally white. Its whole body shook as it got closer. But that song was beyond ghastly. For just a moment, my thoughts cut out. Ah! Ah! The thing dropped to all fours and crawled towards us. It brought its face down to where we were shining the light. I looked right at it. I was assailed by the same feelings I had earlier. I want to die, I want to die, I want to die. I'd rather die than look at this face. My uncle spilt the contents of the bottle, bawling his eyes out. The torch he dropped shone on the body of the creature. While singing its disgusting, meaningless song, it crawled towards us like a newborn horse. It held a rusty sickle in its right hand. Shall I just bite my tongue off and die? I thought. And then, my uncle's phone rang. My crying uncle grabbed his phone from his jacket pocket absent-mindedly and looked at it. "What the hell are you doing at a time like this? We're about to die," I thought, looking at my dazed uncle in the dim light. His phone rang again. He kept looking at it. The creature started crawling towards me. I wet myself in fear. I was about to die. My uncle let out a tremendous roar and picked up his torch from the ground. He rushed over to me and picked up my bottle. "Don't look at it. I'm going to shine this light on it, so close your eyes." I dropped to the ground in a daze. As my sunglasses fell off, I grabbed my head and covered my eyes. I heard about what happened after that from my uncle later. First, he shone the light on the thing's face and looked away so he could only see it out the corner of his eye. It's a little gross, but he drank from my bottle, holding the urine in his mouth, and with the light still shining on the creature's face, he knelt down and spat the urine on it. He then closed his eyes. He sprayed the urine like a mist. The thing screamed like a horse neighing. He sprayed even more, and more, and more, right into the thing's eye, and again. It screamed again, a pitch higher this time, but it was still there. My uncle freaked out, so he pulled down his pants and underpants and shone the light on his crotch. Perhaps the thing looked at it. The creature spat out words that sounded like a curse, then flipped and turned around. But the most dreadful thing was that, until it disappeared, the creature continued to sing its strange song and shake its body while it slowly, slowly moved away. It was roughly the same speed as an elderly person walking with a cane. We continued to watch it, the light shining on its back, until it disappeared. We were consumed with fear that it might decide to turn back around at any point. After what felt like an eternity of fear and agony, the creature finally disappeared. We didn't say a word on the way back to the lodge. We just walked in silence. When we got inside, my uncle checked all the doors were locked and made some coffee. Then, as we sipped our drinks, I finally spoke. "Does that mean the thing has lost interest in us, like you said?" Probably. It would seem my privates are pathetic enough to make the thing cringe, hey? He smiled bitterly. Before long, he started to tell me, bit by bit, the truth about the Jashi. My uncle often goes overseas by boat for his job. He couldn't tell me the finer details, but he's a consulting engineer. He was staying in a town in Northern Europe one day when it happened. One of his engineering friends, who acted as an interpreter, told him that he had something interesting to show him. He was taken to an unpopulated alley, He thought it might be a shopping strip, but he was guided into a small, dirty house. When he went inside, he was really surprised. Although it looked shabby from the outside, inside was a different story. He could tell at a glance that the carpet was expensive. There were ancient urns, precious metals, and the entire place smelled amazing. While he couldn't believe his eyes, he was led to a small back room. A man in his 60s was sitting by the light of some candles. But strangely, even though it was night, the man was wearing sunglasses. He was, according to the locals, in possession of Jashi, the evil eye. The evil eye is well known in folklore all over the world and is a type of superstition. By glaring at someone with evil intent, you can curse them. It's also known as jagan or magan in Japanese. Depending on the power of the evil eye, it can cause a person sickness and weakness, or even lead to death. My uncle listened to their explanation in jest. This man in front of him was supposedly one of those evil eye practitioners. The man sitting down whispered in his friend's ear. Apparently, because my uncle didn't believe him, he wanted him to experience just a little of his power. My uncle, amused, agreed. Again, the man whispered into his friend's ear. His friend relayed the message to him. "I'm going to bind you now. The thing I don't want you to misunderstand is just how strong my power is. You'll probably try to rampage. Just for a single moment, I'm going to look at you. That's it. That's all I'm going to do." My uncle was wondering if there was some type of hidden trick behind the man's eyes. Would they look unsightly? Or would he have colour contacts in? Or perhaps there was some hallucinogenic in the incense that he could smell throughout the house. He was opposed to the bonds, but his friend was a trustworthy man, so he relented. He was tied to a chair and the man approached him. His friend turned away. The man quietly removed his glasses. My uncle looked at the ground. "He looked just like that thing we saw today," my uncle said, and put his coffee cup down on the table. "The moment I saw him, I wanted to die, even though the pupil of his eye was entirely normal. My body revolted against everything. He only looked at me for 1, maybe 2 seconds. It wasn't like hypnotism or anything, it was another level entirely." According to his friend, if a person had enough money, the man with the evil eye would even kill for you. He heard he had even been used by the local mafia in a gang war. Then, about a week before my uncle returned to Japan, the man with the evil eye passed away. He did something that caused the organization he was working with to lose face, so he was erased. He was found tied to a chair in a brothel, dead. Urine was all over the floor. He had torn through the ropes with incredible strength to rip his own eyeball out of his head. Like I said earlier, the Jashi doesn't like dirty things. So while they smeared him with things he was forced to watch a striptease or sex act of some kind, I didn't have the energy to say anything. I just listened. So that meant the monster we saw earlier also was possessed by the evil eye. My uncle then continued, like he read my mind. "I don't know if that thing really was a monster, or a human raised to be that way. But I think just running away from it won't do any good. That's why I faced it, ready to die. They say that kappa hate human saliva as well, right? Sometimes prayers and charms aren't the way to go. Sometimes the human body is the most effective way to protect yourself." As he was talking, I remembered the dream I had about my brother and told him about it. He said that perhaps my brother had come to help me. I cried. My uncle sat there in silence for close to a minute before he spoke again. Things like that happen every now and then. He always was a little more level-headed than you. Do you remember that my phone rang? That was from my ex. But there's no way we could have gotten reception out there in the mountains. Look, there's not even a single bar of reception right here. So that's why I think stuff like that just happens. Anyway, we should leave here right away. I'm gonna sell this lodge as well. I want to talk to my girlfriend quickly as well. My uncle smiled awkwardly and then finished the rest of his coffee. Our final story for this week sees a group of friends visit an abandoned villa high on a mountaintop. While there, another car approaches and two people get out. But there's something strange about these two people and they may soon regret their fun little trip out. Find out why in Ruins on the Mountaintop. I'd like to tell you about the scariest experience I ever had in my life. This really happened, but as I put it down into words, I realized that real-life stories aren't really that scary, huh? Well, I'm not really a good writer to begin with, but here I go. This happened about 10 years ago, when I was still a student in Tokyo. I was born and raised in the countryside, and I had lots of good friends back there, so I would always return home during the holidays and we would drink till morning, go out to pick up chicks, etc. It was great. During one such summer vacation, I was hanging out with my friends one night like we always did, and we went to karaoke with a few girls we'd picked up. Once we were done there, however, the girls went home because they said they had to work the next day. We were bored, so then someone was like, "Well, why don't we go do a test of courage?" And so it was decided that we'd go visit an abandoned villa on top of a nearby mountain. These days, I most definitely wouldn't go there. What the hell is so fun about a test of courage with just dudes? But at the time, I'd just gotten my license, so it seemed like it might be fun. That villa has since been torn down, but apparently it was famous amongst the locals and there were all sorts of rumours about what happened there. Somebody got murdered there, or there was a woman who stared at you from the windows, etc., etc. Well, I had no idea what really went on up there, but I was heading up there with 4 other friends, so honestly, I was pretty relaxed about the whole thing. It was my first time going up there, so I was more excited than scared, really. We'd spent quite a bit of time at karaoke, so it was already past midnight by the time we arrived. I was shocked when we got there. It was like, why the hell is a villa all the way up here? There was nothing else around. We tried turning the car headlights off and it was honestly pitch black. Like, so that's what they mean when they say something is pitch black, huh? Honestly, I was kinda scared, but my friends were there, and so we decided to head in and check it out. We broke through the barricade and then went in. Inside stank of dust and mold, and there was broken glass everywhere. It certainly created an atmosphere. Apparently some gangs had been there as well, as there was graffiti with their names and such, and that kinda scared me a little too. Well, I wasn't much of a fighter, but one of my friends did martial arts, and he was a pretty lively guy, so I figured we'd be fine unless it was a large gang of people if anything happened anyway. Thankfully, no gangs showed up, and after we explored the villa for a bit, breaking things here and there, we got bored and then returned to the car. As we got back in, the driver shut the door and bumped the door lock with his elbow, locking all the doors. I was in the passenger's seat, so I saw it happen, It was just this small thing that happened. After that, we just sat there with the engine running and listened to CDs and chatted and such. Before long, we saw a light coming down from the summit. It appeared to be another car. Who could be coming down the mountain at this time of night, we thought, and I started to get a little nervous. We thought about running, seeing as we'd been trespassing and all, but the atmosphere in the car at the time was like, nobody wanted to seem like a chicken, and so nobody was brave enough to say that we should go. And so, next thing we knew, the car was right in front of us. It was a one-way road, of course, and for some reason it turned out the other car was a taxi. What on earth could they be doing at the top of the mountain at this time of night? I thought. So the taxi stopped a few meters behind our car, and 2 people got out of the back seat. Then they went right past us. Oh no, are they the owners of the villa? I thought, and they looked at us for a bit before turning and going back. One of them appeared to be a woman in a bright red dress. The other was clearly a man in a suit. I couldn't tell how old they were, but they seemed to be around 40 or so. It was also too dark to see their faces. The whole thing was so strange that we were all taken aback. As we sat there dumbfounded, they approached the car. The man on the driver's side and the woman on the passenger's side. And then, suddenly, they grabbed the door handles and started yanking, trying to get into the car. We screamed. My hair was standing on end. Shit! As I said earlier, the driver had accidentally locked the doors, so they wouldn't open. But they didn't seem to care and kept pulling and yanking on the handles. We were terrified. The car was shaking so hard. "Let's get out of here," someone finally said, and the driver quickly took off. Holy shit! The car was in an uproar. Everyone was so scared that we were nearly crying. We stopped at a nearby family restaurant. Oh my god, what the hell was that? Everyone was all worked up. I thought I was so lucky that my friends were all so dumb and cheerful. "And who was the first one who cried?" someone said. "It wasn't me. You cried the most." The conversation went a little something like that. I didn't cry that much, so they didn't say much to me. Once things calmed down, I asked my friend with the martial arts experience why he didn't get out. He was a pretty tough guy, so everyone found that strange. He was the driver, by the way. He said something as he drank from the drink bar. "Because I probably would have lost." "Huh? You're always so confident. What's all this then?" someone teased him. But then the driver got angry. "I mean, my car weighs over 1 ton, you know? All they did was lift the door handle and the entire car shook. They were way too strong." On that note, did you guys see their faces? Their eyes were just... I couldn't get out. I mean, they were pitch black. They weren't human. We didn't get a good look at their faces, so his words shocked us. He wasn't the type to lie, after all. We spent the rest of the night at the restaurant. Quite a bit of time has passed since then, so I don't mind writing this down, but while I didn't cry, I did kinda wet my pants a little. That was when I learnt that when people are truly scared, they do actually wet themselves. A huge thank you and shout out to this week's Cummy tier member, Baked Beans. It's thanks to your support, along with everyone else, that I'm able to keep doing this show, so thank you very much. Don't forget to pick up Yamakoa, The Haunting of Mount Yummy, available on Amazon right now. And check out our newly revamped merchandise store at kowabana.store. And if you'd like to chat about this week's stories, come and join us in the Kowabana Discord. You can find that link in the description or on kowabana.net. You can also check out our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin for exclusive bonus stories and extras, or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/KowabanaJapan for all sorts of Japanese horror you won't find anywhere else. Thanks guys. Stay safe and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.